Hi everyone, so welcome on my channel. Today we have the pleasure to meet Hurley, a professional bass player based in LA who played for a lot of artists. We will talk about that in the interview. So hi Sean, nice to meet you.
Hello, and nice to meet you too.
Thanks a lot for accepting my request and to be here with us. Just a brief presentation of yourself for those who didn't know you're here in France.
Well, I've played one or two shows in France, so I'm sure that most people don't know me unless they go deep into discovering what bass players are up to in Los Angeles. But I have been playing bass for probably over 35 years. And because I moved from Massachusetts from Boston, Massachusetts over to LA, I've had a lot of great experiences doing a lot of session work in LA. I've played with some famous people, which is how often I get discovered via John Mayer. Most importantly, my early band that I had success with was Vertical Horizon, although we didn't really hit it big in France or anywhere other than the US. So I'm still waiting for my big break. But it's been a lot of recordings, and that's the most special thing to me is being able to make records and have those, people discover them at various times. John's a big one. Ringo Starr, I've recorded a record for, and movie things pop up, but it's a pretty exciting bass life in Los Angeles.
Can we say that you are a session bass player or also a
Yes,
touring bass
yeah.
player? Does it include
Yeah.
the on-stage part when we say session bass player?
If you were reading a strict reading of it would probably not be, but I think in the modern world, if you say a session bass player and you find someone up on stage, then that won't be that shocking. There was a time, particularly in country music, where if you did records, you never were on tour. But now I think everybody, when something fun comes up, everybody says yes, and you'll find some of your favorite players that they recorded tons of records in the past. They'll find them on stages or touring with some of those artists that they've recorded with. So,
Okay,
session and touring basis is probably the right way to say what I
okay.
do.
Because I saw it's not the case for every bass player,
Yeah,
etc. So okay, so I understand.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times in an interview, they'll headline, oh, session and touring
Mm.
basis. It all depends, kind of. And sometimes with the credits, if you've toured with someone and haven't recorded with them, or recorded with them and haven't toured with them, people don't know exactly what you've done, and just all gets lumped in and maybe looks better, but it's
Okay.
there's only so many places you can be at once.
Yes, of course, yes. So let's talk about perhaps your first contact with music. It's perhaps a basic question, but just to briefly remind us, how does it start for you in the past? What was the first time you picked a bass? When
Yeah,
you
I have a pretty vivid memory of it because I've told the story, but I had not taken a guitar or bass or anything until a neighborhood friend said, you know, I had played the saxophone the previous year when I was 10. And so now I was 11 and wasn't playing an instrument. A neighborhood friend was a drummer, was a little older than me. He was a friend of my older brother. So his opinion or what he would say would have an effect on me. And he said, hey, you should come up and check out my band and you should play bass. You should learn how to play it. The guy in my band can teach you. And so that idea seemed cool because it came from a kid in the neighborhood who I thought was cool. And when I went to watch the band in the basement, they kind of blew my mind because I had never been to a concert, never seen a live band, only watched some things on MTV. And so I was really struck by how cool it seemed. A few of my friends came up. He kind of picked us off. You should play bass. You should play drums. You should play guitar. And I convinced my parents, who were very supportive. We went out and got a bass. This would probably be in May of 1985, and I got a bass and started taking lessons. And I remember the store. I remember my first bass. It was a Hagstrom, which is a Swedish brand, and some of them are still around. Some vintage ones look pretty cool. And I picked it up and never really put it down. I kind of ramped up into getting excited about it. I always liked music. I was into break dancing the year before. That was
oh,
really happening. I was, rap was just at the start. So it was kind of thrilling for a 10-year-old to be trying to dance and get into grooves. And then bass I was already listening to cool music. So it kind of just all unraveled slowly. Nobody put any pressure. And by the time I was 13,
Uh,
I really had made a decision that that's what I wanted to do is with my life. It's, oh, let me study the bass and try to become a professional, not knowing exactly how I would do that. But it seemed like
uh,
that's where my biggest passion
so
was.
it was pretty natural for you.
Yeah, it
Also.
was
Yeah.
it was easy to get the instrument, to learn, low pressure but supportive by family and friends in a
Mm.
smaller town. So when you get good enough to make music that sounds good to your friends, you get really encouraged. There's really no competition, so you're just learning at your own pace. And when you start to meet other people as you get older, and you kind of can accelerate what you're doing by
Mm.
meeting a great drummer, meeting another singer or something, then starting to play clubs. But the incubator of being in a small town, I think really it worked for me.
Mm.
I would probably have been scared off if I had been in a big city and realized how much I didn't know when I was younger.
And you were near Boston?
In the grand scheme of the world, very near Boston, but
Mm.
in my world growing up, I was 2.5 hours of a drive. So I would
Okay.
only get to Boston maybe once a year. It
Yeah,
was
of course.
not a,
Mm.
it was a place to go and maybe try to make your mark, but it wasn't a daily or even weekly visit. But if there was a big concert, we would make the trek to see AC/DC. I saw all the big bands of the
Okay.
80s, about a 2-hour ride just outside Boston.
And yes, I heard in previous interviews you've made that you were listening to hard rock. You said Motown in
Totally.
another interview, so it was very large influences of music. So it's
Yes.
perhaps your parents, the family, or an environment, or
That's one area where I think my education was stunted because I was the one that would want to get cassettes and
uh,
some albums and get a boombox player.
uh,
My older brother wasn't into music, where when I met other musicians, they had other people in the family doing the collecting and introducing them. But because I was young, I would meet older musicians, and with the bass, it's got that special ability to join so many different groups, so many different genres, so many bands are looking for a bass player. So I got educated. This guy was really into Pink Floyd. This guy was really into the Beatles. This other group of guys was into, you know, heavier stuff. So I got exposed and was asked to learn
yeah,
different music that I didn't know. One of the first things someone asked me to learn was Jimi Hendrix. I was
mm,
like, oh, that's going to be too hard. And then within a half hour, it's like, oh, we got it. Let's jam.
mm, okay,
So I think just by tapping into, there was a lot of wandering around the neighborhood. You could go off and not be accounted for. You could ride your bike to a friend's house, and they had older brothers with record collections. That's how I learned about Hendrix, and the bands that were popular at the time on the radio were all Prince, Bon Jovi,
mm,
all the Guns N' Roses came quickly after. So I just took it all in. MTV was still
yeah,
so new and exciting.
mm,
You would see the Who on there, you'd see an old concert thing, you'd see the latest Madonna video. I just watched it all and took it all in. Like I said, I had liked breakdancing, so I was into rap and early hip hop. So I just listened to it all. But for me, being a musician was rock and roll, and you had to look like someone in AC/DC, the long hair. So I kind of adopted that life or that image early
okay.
on.
We talked about MTV and the past. We can say now we have a lot of contents on internet, on
Sure.
YouTube, etc. How did you learn, or how did you try to progress with bass? With friends, with methods, with paper methods, or
All of
directly?
the above. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I had been guided to a group of kids that were probably 5 to 6 years older than me.
Mm,
They were already playing school dances and clubs, and they just happened to be good kids, smart, and knew enough about music to teach a new player like me. So we had Mel Bay is a very common lesson course for drums, bass, guitar. So I went through book one and book two, learning how to read from day one. That's how I was taught the instrument, was reading. Hey, these are the notes on the staff. This is
mm,
how you put it all together. So as I was learning the physical aspect of the instrument, I was keeping up with all that knowledge by marking my progress through reading notation. And that really helped because then that leads right into theory. You start to learn, I learned all this stuff when I was 12
Mm.
about arpeggios, triads, and
Mm.
and the building blocks to that when I was exposed to jazz in my high
Mm.
school
Okay. Yeah.
jazz band. And it was a combination of the private lessons, the other players that I was, same age of, where we're desperate to learn an AC/DC song or learn a Bon Jovi song or learn a Prince song and try to play it, and also getting a school education of it. So it kind of came from all sources. And
Okay.
because of the bass thing, I would find myself with, I'm 14 and there's a 20-year-old who's got a whole other experience that was going, hey, check this out, check this out. And then
Mm.
I could read books if I didn't know it. So a lot of the notation really helped increase my development quickly so I could keep up with older guys.
Yeah. So you're interested in theory of the music too. Very early, we
Oh
can say
yeah.
it's a very good
Yeah.
perspective. Mm.
Yep. Yeah. It's a great way to build on whatever your interest is stylistically, you know, is, hey, if you know the building blocks and you know how to speak the language,
Yeah.
then wherever you want to point your educational, specialty, you can head straight down.
Okay. And so, just perhaps a few years later, or I don't know when, but you went to Berklee College of Music. So, as John Mayer, we'll talk about that later. So, it's in Boston. So, you were pretty close to Berklee, I guess.
Yeah, it was an obvious, once I decided, when I was 13, I thought, oh, I'll be a musician. And then by the time I'm 18, we're graduating our high school, and then we would enter the college years. And I had to decided on music completely.
yeah,
And I chose Berklee because it had a great reputation, but
yeah,
also it was close. And I
yeah,
was still a little hesitant to the idea of moving even to New York or LA
yeah,
would have been just a little too scary for me. I'm
yeah,
still a bit of a homebody. So Berklee was easy. I could take a bus or a car ride, and I didn't feel like I was set out to sink or swim on my own.
yeah,
And when you go to Berklee, you kind of get placed when you test in. So it kind of is an indication of what was your private lesson. And through the years, because my high school had a jazz program, I would read every day and I would keep being exposed to things. I would meet other older musicians. I bought an upright bass. I found that jazz would be the best way to increase my learning, even
mm,
though I wanted to play rock or pop or work with singers primarily. I found the high school jazz world and going to jazz camps and just interacting with all the horn players and piano players and the study of jazz, that really helped me realize it's just like the education is going to be endless. So jump
yeah.
in, and then Berklee seemed like, okay, now you go to a place where everyone is making music, which is a great community to be a part of when you have lots of practice time, lots of energy to devote, and then you get influenced by all your friends and what they've experienced in whatever town they've come from.
You have a Fender bass signature. So, you were playing from the beginning on Fender earlier. But,
Yeah, there's been, the first instrument I got was out of what's the cheapest,
yeah,
best bass I can get. That's the cheapest thing. So
of course.
probably $150. It
Mm.
happened to be a Hagstrom, which is pretty cool in hindsight, but I was eager to move off from it. And then, you know, other people in town would say, hey, get a Fender, get a
Yeah.
Fender. This is in the 80s when it wasn't,
Mm.
the vintage thing wasn't the rule that we all live by now. It was
Mm.
just yet another option. There were so many new instruments. This is in the heyday of Eddie Van Halen. So Kramer is big for guitars, Jackson,
Mm.
a lot of heavier stuff. Cliff Burton from Metallica played an Aria Pro. So it wasn't an obvious choice to me to, oh, you have to have a Fender. But I happened to find a vintage one when I was 14 or 15. So
Oh,
I had a 63 P bass that was kind of chewed up a bit and had been routed out, so it was $500 at the time. I had that, as well as cycling through some other instruments. I had an Ibanez
oh,
that was a
yeah.
5-string with a high C. I didn't have any rules yet. I didn't know what I could do with the instrument yet, so I was still pushing where do I stop, or where do I make my living, where's my comfort zone. So I had a Charvel, just
Yeah.
trying different things on. And since I had that P bass had fallen into my hands at an early age, while I was trying to learn to push myself, playing Jaco Pastorius, playing some Stu Ham stuff, just exploring everything. I would do it on a P bass, but I'd also grab another bass. I had a Spectre back then as well. And I didn't really judge anything. The one thing I'd never had was a jazz bass until much later. So I didn't know the ergonomics of that. Maybe would have been easier to maybe play faster or to play more fluidly. But my P bass of today, my signature model, that only developed after my time in LA, when I learned what was expected of me as a recording bassist. But when you're younger and you're primarily playing live, you just want to play what's going to keep you moving as quickly as you feel you need to. So I didn't settle into tone and feel the way
Yeah.
I have much later. But I've got my signature P bass here, and when
Yeah.
because it's such a standard feel, it reminds me of when I was playing my 63 as
Yeah.
a kid.
Okay.
But I played so many different basses through the years, and again, primarily it's a tonal choice as opposed to a ergonomic choice. And
Okay.
just responding to the environment, because I'm 47. When I was a kid, I went through the 80s and then the 90s
Yeah.
and then the 2000s, and styles change. And that also applies with instruments and what is expected of you when you walk in the room. And when you're young and you don't really make money, you can play whatever you want.
Yeah.
And then, but for me, growing up in the US, like Fender was always revered. So I was always kind of thinking, if I could have multiple basses, I'd like to have a Fender, maybe something vintage. And that just was always kind of working in the background of, keeping an eye out for instruments.
Your first band was Vertical Horizon, if I remember well.
Yeah, that's the first band that was successful that I was a part of, where
Okay.
there was a record label, a manager, a tour, all the stuff that's required to truly be a professional. But long before that, because I think I joined the band when I was 24, long before that, I actually worked with a folk singer who his name's Arlo Guthrie. He's the son of Woody Guthrie, who in the US is like the father of folk music.
Okay.
And so Bob Dylan copied Woody Guthrie, and Arlo is his son. Arlo had a big breakout concert at Woodstock. He was a 60s guy. So he happened to be in the area that I grew up, which is more rural than Boston. And when I was 16, I actually went on tour with him. His son was in the band. So it was kind of the next generation of Arlo's world. And we played a lot of the outdoor concert venues that I still would play today. They were big. We played Carnegie Hall. We played with some of the famous folk singers of, this was only in 1990 when I first did it. So it wasn't as far away from the 60s
Yeah.
as it is now. So he would be, a contemporary of James Taylor, Joan Baez, all
Okay. Yeah. I
the
see.
Woodstock generation.
Mm.
So for me, because that happened so early on, I was in a tour bus. I hit the hotels every day. I knew that I needed to get back there. And so Vertical Horizon was the first band, once I set up for my own, stopped living at home,
Oh, yeah.
was making my own way. I was on the hunt I need to find a band that to me seems destined for success, where there's good songs, good people, all that stuff. And I happened to be lucky enough. They had a connection to Boston, although they were gravitating towards New York City, where all the labels are. But one day while playing in a blues band, I had a friend say, hey, this band Vertical Horizon needs a bass player. I joined them, we made a record, and that's when I got my first taste of and experience with when you record a record and it's going to have a shot at getting on the radio, starting in a van, concerts, and you build up. That was the first one. And from then on, I moved to LA and tried to really enmesh myself into the proper, truly professional. Hey, you're making records, there's producers, there's artists, and not go back to,
Yeah,
might one day move back home and,
I
talk
understand.
about what I used to do.
We can say in LA it's the best place in the US to make music.
For me, it is. Some
For
people might argue that Nashville is, if
yeah,
they
okay,
prefer a different kind of music,
yeah,
or New York City, although there's less recording. But for straight recording of the various genres that I prefer, LA offers the most opportunity, and it's the best in my opinion. But it's not right for everybody.
At the age of 16, so you were already touring in a band. So I guess that's the first contact with the musician life. So I think you know that life for a long time. You said you made a lot of sessions for other artists, and I saw in previous interviews you were talking about the Beatles. You were listening to the Beatles, and then you played for Ringo Starr. So how it was for you? It was a dream, I guess, a dream come true, or?
Yeah, I wasn't. I mean, it was a dream come true, except I didn't even imagine it would be something to do, because there's only 4 Beatles. And by the time I moved to LA, it's like, well, Paul doesn't need me. So I just didn't imagine that I would run into Ringo, but I happened to, it was timed right. There was a bass player opening for recording, and I was working with a few guys that were engineering, taking part with Ringo. So I didn't actually play next to Ringo, but he came in and sat in the control room with Dave Stewart, who was producing, while I played bass alone to the recordings that Ringo had done. So it was even more stressful in terms of the judgment of, when you're the only person playing in a room, everyone's just listening, and all the other work has been done. So if I didn't groove with Ringo and make him happy, it would be heartbreaking, because I spent so much time thinking about, okay, if I play along to a Beatles record, I can speak that language, and then to be tested in the moment where he was very encouraging. Most musicians are really encouraging and nice, and he certainly is one of the kindest and most encouraging. And when I was getting into it, I was just going for it as if it was a live performance, and he noticed the way I was moving was the way, he's like, oh yeah, when I play Ticket to Ride, I move my shoulder the same way. So he showed me a video, and he broke the ice and made me feel like, okay, I can do this, it'll be great. And it was just like another session where it was rewarding, it was exciting, everyone was happy with the results, and then I could put that on my list of, I've played with Ringo Starr, one of my favorite drummers in all the land.
Yeah, I can understand. Yeah, of course. You played also for Alicia Keys, I saw.
That was through John Mayer. He had called me one day, and it was a day before the session, and he said, hey, are you available tomorrow? Which is the classic LA, if you're there and you get the call and you can do the gig, your life can change. I had not recorded with John ever before, but I had met him, and he had sat in with friends of mine while I was playing bass. And he said, I'm recording with Alicia Keys tomorrow. Can you do it? She told me she was going to bring a bass player, but she just flew to LA and didn't bring him. So can you come and do it? And so we did it for a couple days, and that went on her record, As I Am, I believe, which we had a lot of fun, because I was just playing with John in the studio for the first time. They hadn't completed the writing process of the songs yet. So they were fleshing them out, and me and the drummer and the additional guitar player plus John and Alicia were able to just jam in the studio, try out ideas. But that's the most fun you can have when you kind of have all day to see if you can conjure up some magic.
I wanted to ask you what is the best part of the job? So perhaps you have already answered to that question. This is to go in studio and to participate to the song, to write the song with other musicians.
That's for me the most exciting, when you feel like there's a puzzle to be put together or solved in some way, and to be part of that solution for the artist, where they fall in love with their initial idea based on what you're contributing to it. And it doesn't matter to me if there's a scripted line that someone has come up with, and like, I really want you to play this, when you can execute their vision and it kind of surpass what
Mm,
they had in mind, and then maybe add a little of your own flavor to it, so you keep what the music wants to be, and improve on it by what you offer. To me, that's the most exciting, because it's something that can live forever.
yeah.
A concert can be fun and exciting, but it becomes a memory at
Mm,
some point, where a record
is a
becomes
memory.
art. Yeah,
Mm,
I will have these recordings that we're talking about now. Some are 10 years ago, and then 40 years from now they'll still be there, and I we can listen to them and remember the thing. So I always approach everyone with the same level of excitement, because I still have not found any, I have not gotten bored yet when
yeah.
I am faced with creating music with people, when it's not yet, it hasn't become what it will become yet. That's the most thrilling thing. And it's what I read about in magazines when I was young, that they,
Yeah.
okay, that's what I want to do. I don't want to just be in one group and only have our 10 songs every couple of years on the album, but I want to play every day if possible with somebody who has a song that needs to be brought to life with a rhythm section.
And would you say most of the time when you came in studio, you have to write the bass lines, or is it already written, or?
Most of the time for me, because of the calls that I get, there, every job can be different in LA, but there's a lot, because I've gravitated to singer songwriters. A lot of them, if they make a demo, they maybe just presenting voice and guitar, or voice and keyboards, and the bass for them is not something scripted. So I often, and because they're singer songwriters, they usually don't provide any music, written music. So I come in with a blank piece of paper with, ready for notation. And when I hear the song, I just simply write, what's the chord? It's just like when you look at a jazz book, it's got the melody written, but there's just the chord. So as a
Mm,
bass player, I've spent most of my studies going, okay, if there's a D7, what do I do? And
mm,
that's, to me, just exciting. So okay, so what are the chord sequences? Is there, can I do any voice leading to connect? What will I do? What's the McCartney approach to it? What's the Jamerson approach to it? What can I do with what I'm, my vocabulary? And it's easy to think of, when there's a singer, it's just a matter of, listening and conjuring up the best part, and then taking the feedback
mm.
that someone has, whether it's another member of the band or the artist themselves, to go, hey, can you simplify there? Can you make that more complex? Or
Yeah.
that's great. Can you repeat that? Because that's what we're looking for. I think that's the most exciting part, when it's unscripted, and then you're developing the script with the other members.
Okay, and you made a perfect transition for my next question, because you said
Great.
usually it's a voice memos. So I thought
Mhm.
about a story of John recently for Wild Blue, I guess, who is just it just show how was the first voice memo, which is
Right.
the guitar and the voice. So we will talk about John. How did you start playing with him, etc. But sometimes when you came, there is just some chords on the guitar, the voice, some words, and you add the bass line on it. That's it. You already
Yes.
know if it will be a simple bass line or a complex one, or how does it work for this part?
It usually, I'd like to start with what I would, I've stolen or I've borrowed phrases from Tim Pierce, who's a revered session guitar player in LA, who was on some of my earlier sessions. He's probably 10 years older than me, so he was very, his learning from him on the job was always great. And he would say, as a guitar player crafting parts, he would start with the simplest idea and then execute it, the best performance of the simplest idea. I tend to start there. I start very simply. Not everybody does this. Some guys start complex and then simplify as they
Uh,
go, just exploring how they want to fill the space and then settle. Where I kind of start at the very simplest version of, how do I make the song feel alive. This is not just to play stupid or dead, but when, the tempo is the first thing you notice. How fast is the song? So what will it require to, feel like it's progressing, and always thinking, hey, if we have a 3 or 4 minute song, what's our pace?
Mm.
What are paying attention to the dynamic phrase? And even if someone doesn't have the lyrics together, they often are going, hey, I want the chorus to lift, or I want this to just float. Wild Blue tends, like as an example, it was not a finished song when we were working on it. So but it also was obvious that it felt like a vibe, a groove that would percolate through, as opposed to, okay, verse, big chorus, bring it down. But it didn't have the arc of a pop song. It had the arc of a jam song or something with groove. And you don't get to do music full time unless you have some experience and intuition and know how to collaborate with other people. So you've all the people I play with, there's it's not like any of us seem like geniuses. It's just, hey, this is simple. Let's start going for it and see how we react to each other. And if the drum beat changes, then I can react to it. If even, hey, is the drummer going to hit a hi-hat or a ride cymbal? Is he gonna, what does the snare sound like? How much should I play? In the early days, I would think, oh, what's the kick pattern? I need to know it. And the older I've gotten, the more experience I got. I don't think about defining anything yet. The kick can do whatever it wants, and I'll find what feels right. Sometimes it's playing with it. Sometimes it's playing when it doesn't play. There's nothing set, but there's just a lot of simple, like, follow your instincts and then check in at the end of the song and see how everybody feels. Most importantly, the artist. And then as you get older, you tend to gravitate, or people gravitate to you that like your instincts. So you kind of have to say less as you progress, and people know, I can trust you, so do your thing. That's a very common phrase. Hey, do your thing. And then when you take direction, well, it's like, great, you did your thing. Can you also do this other thing? Blah, blah, blah. And it's very much out of friendship and respect. And it tends to come together very organically. But a lot of times an artist will be looking for, I don't know what I want yet, so give me something to react to. So you use the canvas that they have to create, and you go, all right, here's my blue idea. They go, cool, let's add some red to that, or let's wait, but don't come, give them something to respond to. And that's one of the most exciting things, is that first draft. How does that come together? How does that shape the rest of what the song will become, is what those initial impulses caused you to do. Because there's really, there's only one time you get to hear a song for the first time.
Yeah.
So what does it do to you, and how quickly do you act on that? And then what is created after that moment?
Yeah, so as you said, it's like permanent adaptation when you play with
Sure.
other musicians. And just to talk about John and other musicians, I guess the closer you get to these people, to these artists and musicians, the better you play the music. Or
I think so.
you have to be friend to be a better player, you will say, or
I think so, because taking away, but the wonderful thing about musician culture is you start the day as strangers often, and then you end the day by lunchtime. Everybody has a new best friend, and there's hugs and goodbyes, are like, oh, I wish this wasn't ending. People become fast friends, and I've never worked with musicians that didn't want success to happen. So everyone comes in, it's no one's trying to make anyone feel bad or say anything negative. There's always a sense of, even if it's not right, like, well, what are the best words we could use to guide us to the right thing? If a drummer goes, the artist doesn't, no, I wasn't feeling it in double time, they'll find an easy way to say, oh, when you were warming up, you did a halftime thing. That was, I feel like that's the vibe.
Mm.
there's a lot of encouragement. So because you tend to inhabit that environment, you feel like a friend. And when you remove any worry, the worst thing that could happen is if you get anxious when you're
Yeah.
playing and you second guess yourself. And then, anytime I've ever made a mistake, it's like, I overthought it. I was worried
Yeah.
about, would they like this?
During the
When you
playing,
get
yeah.
in,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Like you kind of stump yourself. So the best thing you can do is just play with people that are a good fit. And it tends to be, I've been fortunate. I think a lot of people that do it professionally just found ways to communicate in a supportive way. So even
Mm.
if it takes all day and it is a grind to get it right, you're doing it from a place of group, achievement where everyone wants to encourage the other guy. I want the drummer to play the best he's ever played. He wants me to play the best I've ever played.
Mm.
The keyboard player, everyone wants to be their best and help the other guy be the best. And it can be great when most times you walk in and that's the case. And I've done sessions where everyone's a stranger, but by the first playthrough, it's like, oh man, I really like what you're doing. And everybody sort of, that brings a smile to people's faces when you just lend an encouraging word. And then you can get to, it doesn't have to be magic on the first take. It can take 5 takes. You can punch in. But when I make a mistake, if I'm in a supportive room, it's like, oh, I don't feel bad about myself. I'll get it right. And then next time you work with somebody, it's like, oh, you never make mistakes except that one time. And like, oh yeah, there's a supportive place where you're encouraged to try to find something, and if you fail, it's all part of the journey.
Just to be back to my first question, because I have too much questions to ask you,
I
but
know, and yeah,
I
there's a lot of rambling.
yeah, and I discovered you so with the work of John Mayer for the first
Sure.
time. How long do you know John? For the first time you met in, because I saw you
Yeah.
made the first tour on Born and Raised, perhaps, or before you started. It was on
Yeah,
Born and Raised.
that was the first recording I did for a John
Okay.
Mayer record.
Mm.
But years before that, God, it must have been, I feel like it was 2006 that I recorded that Alicia Keys stuff that John
Oh,
was
yeah.
part of. So, but the real, like, I never really played with John as a bass player until in 2008. He was doing a tour and he called me up and asked me to do it. And it was the end of his Continuum tour, which
Okay.
had gone on for almost 2 years. He had done one extra summer tour, which I was a part of in 2008. And then he made another record, and I didn't take any part in that, but I did do the following tour for that record in 2009 and 2010. And when that tour ended, he called me up and said, hey, I'm going to go into New York, Electric Lady, and I'm going to make, what would become Born and Raised. And he asked me to be a part of that. So that was my first album recording, which we started in December of 2010 and did it through most of the spring and summer of 2011.
Mm.
And from then on, I've done some tours with him, some recording. The years fly by and I do a little bit of this, little bit of that. And I had first met him through just being in LA and meeting
Yeah. Okay.
players in his band. We had a conversation probably back in 2004 where it was like,
Oh,
oh, hey,
okay.
we have
Yeah.
these people in common. So every time I'd run into him after that, it was not like seeing a stranger. I was like, okay. And I knew more and more. Oh, now I played played clubs around LA with a member of his band, David Ryan Harris. So I'd find myself, just as you do when you're in a city longer and longer, it's like, oh, I know 3 people that play with that guy, and we do some off night gigs here, and oh, John will sit in, which all leads to the comfort level of when he asked me to tour in 2008. It wasn't strange for
Yeah.
him to be calling me, and we had seen a lot of each other.
It's actually a small network, we can say, when you are in a
Yeah,
city.
absolutely.
And just to go on his last album, I saw that you were playing on the music video on Sob Rock, and also on some shows like Jimmy Fallon one.
Yep.
Just
Yeah,
behind
we
John.
did.
So
I think there were probably 3 TV shows that we've done.
Yeah.
Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert,
Oh, yeah.
and there was maybe the Today Show, but we did a lot of that because we made a video for Last Train Home,
Yeah.
and then we did some performances. They had to be taped because of COVID. We didn't go to the studio to do it, so we taped those performances and then turned them into the TV shows. I think we've ended up playing Last Train Home, Wild Blue,
Uh,
and
It
maybe
shouldn't matter,
even, yep.
which is a wonderful one. So about this album, did you make all the bass line with John in the studio? You started, or
This one was interesting because it was not planned in the way that it ultimately it became a record that got made, and okay, it comes out. But we started the year 2020.
yeah,
John had hit me up, and I hadn't recorded his previous record, so I call it being on the bench, like when you're on a team but someone else is starting but you're waiting.
Mm.
So I doing other things, and so I don't expect to hear from an artist for a while. He hit me up and we started recording, working on some music, some that we had not finished during Born and Raised, just song ideas that never got developed. In January and February, we were recording. And then when March came, we had done a little recording like a week before everyone was told to stay at
lockdown,
home
yeah,
in
yeah.
Los Angeles. By the summertime, he had figured out, okay, I'm not going to do any of that, what we did in the early part of the year. I have a whole new idea of the music I want to do, and let's do it in the summer. So we set out at the same studio, Henson Studios in LA, in July and August for over about 2 months. We would just work on these new songs that he had demoed up with acoustic guitar. So we played through everything, and John sometimes will redo something. So a couple times we finished, and then we'd all go back in and change something. Shouldn't matter, but it does was one of those. Even Last Train Home, I think we started on and then came back a week later and really executed it because it was just a late idea in the sessions, and then now it's becoming a bigger song, so we kind of reimagined it. And some of them, I think there must be 10 songs on the record. I played on 5 of them ultimately. Some of them I recorded, and 3 of them John ended up playing the bass on because he always does that for his demos. And during his revision process, I know one time he called me and I couldn't get there, so he must have played, and some of them were tricky, so he had to he ended up playing on 3 songs. I played on 5, and 2 of them are older songs, or not older, but they were recorded earlier that Pino Palladino played on.
Okay.
So those are, and I had heard those tunes before. They maybe came out as singles, so those are added to the record. But John's a good bass player. When he does a demo and plays bass, I always write it out. If usually it's good, so I want to write it and steal it if I can, and then when we play, I can go, okay, you did this, maybe we should do this, because he'll be playing to not the real drums, but the drum template or something he put together. So when you play it with the real drummer on the session, sometimes you have to adjust. And then when I leave, or the bass and drums and the beginning stages leave, John probably spent 6 months more working on it. And I know that's how he had sent me a message. I know on these 3 songs I kept redoing, and he's like, I just grabbed a bass, and I had left a lot of my equipment there, so he grabbed one of his basses, but maybe played through my DI because it sounds good. And I really like, it reminds me of the demo I heard, which is every artist can do that when they write. They get hooked on, well, I did this thing, and so I'm on the record, John's on the record, and Pino's on the record. There's a good trio of bass players.
So that, okay, incredible, yeah. For the songs of John, I saw when I play guitar to try to learn them, because there are Some of them, a lot of them are quite complicated because I saw on
Sure.
chords there are a lot of like jazz chords. It's not simple chords, it's augmented chords, etc. It's very interesting
Right.
for you, I guess, to play on them because you love jazz too. So I guess for you it's very interesting to play with the John for the musical point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. With a talented artist, they're usually even the simple things are a little more, there's something a little more to them. So I just always enjoy what is happening while it may appear simple, what is going to add to the interest as a listener. And that could be, adding what's the voicing that the guitar plays. And so I try to use my session musician skills to quickly diagnose what's happening, what are the notes that are
Mm.
being played, and listening, looking, hearing the conversation with the keyboard player.
Mm.
If they talk about a voicing, my ears always perk up. Okay, because what I do can drastically change. If I choose to only play root notes, that has an effect. And then if I play anything that's not a root note, especially on the downbeat, that'll have a even greater effect on what is that chord voicing. So, but I find guitar players fascinating. Every time somebody picks up a guitar in front of me, I just stare at their hands and see what they're doing to conjure up what they're after. And I try to make, even if I'm just playing the A to their A major 7 chord, I'm thinking, okay, if I had to flesh it all out with an arpeggio, where are all my notes to keep up, and let that inform. With the beauty of the bass is, like, take a song like Last Train Home,
Mm.
the chords are moving around and they move at a certain rhythmic value, but when they pause, then it's my job
Mm.
to do something that's got a melodic line or something rhythmic, or I can use those available spaces to,
Mm.
I've got rhythm and melody that I can add, where if a guitar player does it, he's now playing a line that competes with the vocalist. But if I do it, I'm an undercurrent
Mm.
that can keep the song moving forward, or however I choose to use my powers.
Mm.
I have the ability to play notes and use melodies in it with a different effect than
Even if
anybody
it's
else in the
quiet.
band.
Yeah. Mm.
Yes, yeah, because it moves, there's kick drum and snare, and I'm somewhere
Yeah.
in there.
Mm.
So, and I don't compete in the same way that everyone else does. Keyboards and guitars, if they
Yeah.
both go for an answer to a vocal thing and there's a pause, they can't both attack it at once. But I can change an octave, or I can just outline a chord, and I can do a lot with very little, which
Mm.
I love. That's my excitement about the bass. I can do so much with so little,
Yeah.
and it's endless, because simplicity, you can't outthink it. It's like, it's air, it's the most vital thing, but it's
Mm.
also the most invisible.
You're very passionate when you speak. It's wonderful.
Yes, my apologies.
No,
Yeah.
it's perfect. And just to follow this discussion, I write the question as what's your daily practice routine, but I want to ask you, how do you prepare for a recording in studio or a concert? How does it work? You have all the songs in your room, you made a lot of rehearsal on your own until it's perfect, or how does it work?
Well, with live, I prepare for them quite differently.
Yeah.
With live, there is a script that the songs have been recorded. You can prepare for, if there's going to be an open section, but that's relatively easy to navigate. Okay, we're going to jam on the verse section.
Mm.
Okay, we all have ideas, but there is a script that's being
Mm.
followed. So it's that's the hardest stuff to do. You need time to, how do you input into your brain the songs you're trying to memorize? Even if you're preparing with charts, you have to you make the marks that you can read while it's live. So a lot more prep time goes into any live performance. Even if it's a one time, hey, someone's sending me songs to learn and there's only 10 songs, to listen through 10 songs and make sure I know the form, because as a bass player, it's my job to always be in the right place at the right time. A guitar player may go, oh, I'm gonna hold, I can't remember what happens, or how does the bridge start? I don't have any luxuries of guessing, and drummers don't either. So it's just a lot of preparation. I have changed it over time. When I had to fill in with this group Squeeze, that's a UK band from the 80s, I put on their songs. They sent me a live recording, and it was probably 15 songs, which is a lot to process. So I would just pick one song at a time, and I would play it on repeat. I've started to bring in songs into Pro Tools and just have them the way I would also look at a session. And if I want to inspect 1 bar, 4 bars, 8 bars, I have easy access to it, and I can loop it versus just listening on any other recording. Sometimes the rewind and the targeting of where does the verse begin? You have to, some of the interfaces are not as easy to handle as bring it right into Pro Tools so I can start and stop anywhere where I want, listen critically to hear what's happening. I do that now with everything, even preparing for the TV show stuff with John. I wanted to review the record, make sure I knew the ins and outs of what I played, and also know what possibilities might be there. Like, okay, what if we make that section longer? So I make sure that I really know everything, and that just takes time. So I've tried to get better at, how do you memorize things? I practice with, when I meet someone, if I'm out walking my dog, I try to go, let me remember the person's name. Let me remember the dog's name. Let me remember what day I'm meeting them. Try to just do everything you can, sing along to songs, try to remember lyrics, just become someone who's better at memory. And I've gotten so much better through the years, because it's just, okay, how do you remember 4 bars? That's easy. So then, is the next 4 bars the same as the first 4, or is it different? Usually it's only different by one thing, if it is. And so that's all that practice time. For sessions, usually if someone doesn't send music, there is no preparation, just thinking of what instrument should I bring. And I still practice before a session. If I know I'm going to read music, I'll just read whatever I can. Doesn't have to be related in any way, but just, if it's going to be a movie session where they always give you a script of, these are the notes we need and nothing else, I make sure I read through 2 or 3 pieces where I haven't seen them before, so there's no memory going on, and I'm just reading notes so that I'm primed and ready. And then if it's a improv session where you're creating bass lines, I just make sure when I pick up a bass the day before, I'm feeling as fluid as possible, where whatever I want to play, whatever I imagine, it just comes out. So,
practice
if someone
scales
mentions,
and to be a,
yeah,
for example,
I always start with the easy stuff. Well, the fundamentals, I should say. So scalar things, making sure that I just pick a random key and go, all right, let me just go through here. Let me think of a song with changes. Let me play anything that anybody's mentioned. Oh, did they talk about this bass player? Great, let me listen to that and pull up some sheet music, make my fingers move, explore an idea, come up with a riff. I did a thing when Seymour Duncan Pickups asked me to do a little sort of a lesson. And I thought, what's something I do almost every day is come up with a simple 1 bar riff. I love pentatonic minor things. It's easy, bluesy stuff, feels good. So come up with one, and then make that the basis of a 12 bar progression. So move it around, 1, 4, 5. But then also go, okay, so can I play this up an octave? And if I can't, how do I have to adjust to do that? And then you just start these little challenges. So 1 bar becomes a 12 bar challenge and a multi-octave challenge. And then it becomes no limits. My goal walking into any session is no limits, no fear of any position on the instrument, any key. If I know I'm going to have to play with a pick because it's not what I was born with,
Yeah.
I go, all right, let me practice with my pick. If I know it's going to be more of a 60s hollow body,
Yeah.
more interesting Beach Boys moment. Let me just make sure that that's what I'm thinking about. So usually you get an idea of, hey, we're going for this, because they'll tell you, make sure you have your Hofner with you, or make sure bring this amp, or do you have reverb? I want to do something plucky or thumpy, whatever adjectives they give you. And just, I try to spend a little bit of time thinking about that moment, thinking about something, and just listening to a song on the radio and learning it fast, so that when you walk in, the training that I was told I would have to know is you have to listen once and be able to play the song, which is terrifying if you've never done it. So you just practice, practice, practice. Will Lee, I would just read an interview and he'd say, oh, I listen once and I play. So I go, all right, I have to learn to listen and identify exactly the chord and the quality that's going by. As a bass player, I start with the root note and quickly try to figure out what else is happening on top.
Okay. Yeah, so
it's a lot, but it's also simple,
Yeah, but I saw there was a lot of mental preparation. So not only on the instrument, but a lot of mental during driving. I guess you try to remember some bass line parts. So okay, that's very interesting. Yeah. And just the other question, what is your daily practice routine? Because it's a very common question, we say, for a lot of amateur people, amateur musicians. But for you as a professional bass player, when you woke up, grab your bass, what is the first exercise you will make? So with the metronome a lot?
I play with a metronome less because so much of my job is with a metronome. So I know I'm going to do that almost every day, no matter what. And I've gotten very, very, very comfortable with it, that I don't think about needing to work on it, because again, it happens every day. So what I try to do is whatever the last challenge that crossed my fingers, like if somebody said to play in the style of somebody and it maybe was something that wasn't as familiar with me, I try to pick up that day. Or if someone mentioned a song and I didn't know it, oh, this Aretha Franklin song. So I try to just use whatever last nugget that left me thinking that I didn't know everything I wish I did about it. I usually start the next day with that. So, somebody mentioned what is hip, and I go, I can't play that as well as I wish I could. So, okay, print out a transcription, and for the next week, that'll be first on my list to go through. And I keep, much to my family's laughter and chagrin, I keep a bass everywhere. I have one next to the kitchen table with an amp, so that I can, the minute I'm done with breakfast, I can pick up a bass. And I usually just play A flat major scale somewhere, because I want to play something that gets me thinking. It's like, okay, I got to think of flats. I got to think of, and I try to play play the scale on one string, so that I'm not just going through a pattern that I don't think about. And okay, that was easy. D flat. Let me just think. Just try to go for something that is the challenge that is not as second nature as, C major, I know everything there is to know. So go, okay, whatever, and just pick a thing. What was the last thing somebody said? Okay, this song, pull it up. Do I know what that is? Try to grab a melody, try to come up with the thing that's related to the Seymour Duncan, come up with a riff, like try to play something in a measure that I haven't already played 100 times before. What if someone said, hey, C sharp minor, give me something to build on? Okay, what's the tempo? Boom, go, boom, get it, do. Maybe I've never played it before. Just try to do that first thing to get myself going, or read a transcription first thing, just to snap myself to attention, to go, oh, this isn't that easy. This isn't I can't do this in my sleep. I have to think. I have to be ready. I have to be alert. Just like any other task. If you've done it too many times, you get a little lazy with your, even if you're doing a great job, you get a little,
Oh,
what was
yeah.
that?
Okay. Yeah.
I try to make sure that that is ready so that when I, drive through traffic and make it, or even just go to my little home room and open a laptop, I can get to my best place quickly without having to fight through any kind of fog.
And to add creativity to the bass line. As you said, you try to extract in other song on other ways of playing. You try to extract what is the essence of the song. For example, an Aretha Franklin song, you would say, what is the bass line I have to play to sound like an Aretha Franklin song? That's it?
Right, exactly.
That's what you
So
try to, okay.
yeah, to try to get to it's like when someone reads a sentence, you want to be able to follow exactly what they've said, understand it, and be able, well, could I write it with the correct punctuation that was used? And as a listener, I do that more than I am given reading things. If I were an orchestral player, I would probably be reading so much more, and so improvisation would be harder, so I would want to tend to that. So I'm just thinking of, when I hear something, can I diagnose what I've heard? Can I transcribe it? Can I follow along? Can I say yes and add to it in the same vocabulary that's being used? Can I communicate with a child, with an adult, with an animal? And when you do that as a player, can I speak blues? Can I speak jazz? Can I speak pop? Can I sound authentic in all regards, and also be me, do what I do within those genres? Because when people say, "Oh, do what you do," like, well, I don't wear the same outfit every day. So I want to wear sneakers. I want to wear boots. I want to dress up. I want to be lazy. I want to be comfortable. I try to do that, with music, it's such a luxury to think about it all day long and also have it be your job. So that's the best thing ever, was something you think about all the time because you want to, and then you get to apply that to your profession, your job, try to build your career around it, and try to get a little element of it. There's a lot of other things that go on in everybody's day, so with less time, I would like to do more, work a little smarter, learn a song faster, be efficient, and I always review old songs that I thought I knew well, and I always learned something that I overlooked because I wasn't, now, because I'll pull it into Pro Tools and go, I want to hear that 4 bars always slipped by me, and when you play it live, it doesn't matter. But let me listen, and let me start fresh and see what's really there. And I've done that with so many songs and gone, I now understand it more. I know what they were doing within the rules. I can hear where the rules were broken. I love that. And then try to add something to my vocabulary,
Yeah, that's
because
it at
that
the
is
end.
also hard to do. So if I can add something new every day, God, that would be amazing. I can't do it every day, but I try to. What if there's not a new lick so much, but a new
Yeah.
way to just find yet another lick that adds to the story every day.
To conclude this musical part, just if I'm a beginner bass player, what will be the best advice you will give me?
I think, I used to think I had more answers to the questions that I realize just by watching. There's a lot of great players and there's a lot of great information online. So the only advice I think that really holds up through the years is to try to be the best you can be, because everyone has limitations. So, practice, try to reduce your limitations as much as possible. Pursue the music that makes you the most excited. And then within your limitations, try to make the most exciting music you can. So for me, I love the simple stuff. I love the fundamentals. I love doing little moves, and other people like playing more and like being more of a lead voice. And there's no right way to do it, but I think explore to your outer limits, and then don't limit yourself in terms of, oh, I only want to do this one thing without having explored, but also just allow yourself to be pulled to the music that makes you the most excited, because I think by doing that you will become a much better musician,
Of course,
even
yeah.
if it doesn't require this ultimate technique that no one on earth can achieve. But find what you're most passionate about it, and then give yourself fully to it, and your instrument you're playing will just rise up because you'll be most invested in it.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Sean, so thanks a lot for being there
My
with me.
pleasure.
It was very, very interesting, and I learned a lot of things, and I think that the viewers too. What are the different ways perhaps to contact you and to following your work?
Yes. I am on Instagram, which tends to be the easiest way for all of us to communicate. And bass is such a niche world that I almost always get to the response of anybody. A lot of bass players say, "Hey, what are you using? What are your strings?" So on Instagram is the easiest way to reach me, which is Sean E. Hurley. That's my middle initial, SEANE Hurley. That's kind of it for what I'm doing. There's a website that I got into early on, and it's been great, especially during pandemic times where people are trying to create to make recordings, but it's called Sound Better. And I'm on there where people hire me, because it'll, if you're looking for a bass player, you'll find me on the list, and then you can reach out to me, and they allow musicians to be, contacted and paid. But I also get work through Instagram as well. I between those two things, I feel like I get contacted daily, and there's always something in the work. So that's the easiest way to reach me and to communicate, whether you're just a bass player or it's somebody out there that wants to have bass added to their music.
Thanks a lot again, Chen, for your time and your passion about the instrument. It's very good to hear, and it's perfect.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Have
I'm
a
glad
good
we
day.
could do it. And yes, I'm glad it all worked out. Thank you for your patience and allowing
No,
me to get this fitted in the right time.
thank you. I know you were really busy this time, so there is absolutely no problem. So thanks again for your time.
Great. Have a good one.
Sean.
Thanks for having me.